They didn't want you to see this. WWE put this match at the opening of Night 1. First match. Before the crowd was even warm. Before the cameras had finished doing their sweeping shots of the Las Vegas skyline. Before the pyro had finished settling. They buried Drew McIntyre vs. Jacob Fatu in the opener slot and the internet is furious about it. Drop a comment right now. Do you think WWE deliberately tried to kill this match's momentum? Because what happened inside that ring at Allegiant Stadium was so violent, so raw, so absolutely unhinged that it made every other match on that card look like a Sunday afternoon tea party. Drew McIntyre vs. Jacob Fatu. Unsanctioned. No rules. No protection. No WWE liability. And no mercy. And by the time it was over, the Scottish psychopath had done what nobody in that building, nobody watching on ESPN, nobody streaming on Netflix internationally actually believed was possible. Drew McIntyre stood over the broken body of the Samoan werewolf at WrestleMania 42 and picked up the win. But here's what's making fans absolutely lose their minds tonight. It's not just that Drew won, it's how he won. It's what it took to put Jacob Fatu down. And it's what this result means for the future of SmackDown. We are going to break all of it down. But first, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because Ring Rumble 1 does not do surface level wrestling coverage. We go deep. Now let's get into it. Segment 1, the blood feud, how we got here. Let's rewind, because if you're going to understand just how monumental this moment was, you need to feel the weight of everything that came before it. This rivalry didn't start with a handshake that turned into a shove. It didn't start with somebody cutting a promo and somebody else interrupting it. This rivalry started with betrayal, and it started in blood. Cast your mind back to the 3 stages of Hell match earlier this year. Drew McIntyre vs. Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship, a war that had the entire WWE universe on the edge of their seats. And Jacob Fatu, who was supposed to be a neutral, chaotic presence on SmackDown, inadvertently got involved. His interference in that match actually helped McIntyre win, giving the Scottish Warrior the WWE Championship he had clawed and fought for over years of frustration. For one brief, shining moment, Drew McIntyre had everything. And then Fatu took it all away. Because Fatu, humiliated and furious that he had accidentally handed the belt to a man he despised, came back 3 weeks later with a singular mission. He cost McIntyre the title. He watched with those cold, dead eyes as Cody Rhodes pinned Drew McIntyre, and the undisputed WWE Championship slipped right through Drew's fingers again. That is a different kind of pain. That is not losing your championship in a straight fight. That is having your throne ripped from you by a man who hates you so deeply, so personally, that he is willing to sacrifice his own opportunities just to watch you suffer. And it gets deeper than that because Jacob Fatu genuinely believed, and still believes, that Drew McIntyre was the man who attacked him backstage last fall. The man who sent him to the hospital. The man who forced him to undergo significant dental surgery while he sat on the shelf watching others take his spot. Whether that accusation is true or not, the conviction with which Fatu believes it is all that matters. In his mind, Drew McIntyre is not just a rival. He is the man who tried to end his career. He is the man who threatened his family's livelihood. He is the man who tried to take food off his children's plates. You don't come back from that with a wrestling match. You come back from that with war. Segment 2, the chaos on the road to Mania. And war is exactly what they gave us in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania 42. March 20th, SmackDown. These two didn't wait for the bell to ring. Drew McIntyre drove his car, an actual car, an automobile, into Jacob Fatu's vehicle in the arena parking lot. He didn't text him. He didn't call him out in a promo. He rammed his car into Fatu's car before the show even started. That is not a wrestling angle. That is the behavior of a man who has lost all grip on reason and sanity. The brawl that followed lasted hours. It spilled through every corridor of that arena, out into the parking lot, back through the building, up staircases, through production areas, and then in one of the most insane television moments of 2026 it ended with both men falling off a high steel balcony onto the concrete floor below. Let that sink in. These two men threw each other off a balcony on a Friday night TV show. Both arrived at the following week's SmackDown with significant injuries. McIntyre had his ribs taped. Fatu was limping. And neither one of them cared. Nick Aldis, SmackDown's general manager, had seen enough. He had no choice. He made the WrestleMania match official and he stripped WWE of all liability. Unsanctioned match. You want to kill each other? Fine. But leave us out of it. And then on the April 10th SmackDown, one of the final stops on the road to WrestleMania, McIntyre filmed a promo from inside a jail cell. He looked into that camera and told Jacob Fatu's children that their father would always be a convict. He said Fatu was an animal who belonged behind bars. He called him a criminal and a liar and said that at WrestleMania, he would be judge, jury, and executioner. Now here is where the WWE universe is divided. Because a lot of people, a lot of you in this comments section think McIntyre crossed a line with those promos. Bringing up a man's past. mentioning his children, using his criminal record as a weapon. Some of you think that makes Drew the villain in this story. Others think Drew was justified after everything Fatu put him through. Drop your take in the comments right now. Was Drew McIntyre the hero or the villain in this feud? I want to see that debate. Don't hold back. Segment 3, The Match WrestleMania 42 Night 1, April 18, 2026. Allegiant Stadium, Las Vegas, Nevada. 65,000 people packed into the Death Star. John Cena hosting the grandest stage in sports entertainment for the final time. And in the opening match of WrestleMania 42 Night 1 broadcast live on ESPN2 in a simulcast that brought in a record non-title unsanctioned match audience, Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu stepped through that curtain. There was no pomp. There was no elaborate entrance sequence. McIntyre walked out looking like a man who had been sharpening a blade for 6 months. Fatu came through that curtain like something feral had been uncaged. The crowd in Allegiant Stadium already hot before the first bell absolutely erupted when these two locked eyes across that ring. The referee stood in the center. Then he looked at both men. And then in what was perhaps the most appropriate symbolic gesture of the entire night, he stepped aside. Because there were no rules. There was no disqualification. There was no count out. There was nothing protecting either man from the other. And then the bell rang. What followed was not a wrestling match. It was a demolition derby. It was two human weapons colliding at full speed with no brakes and no safety nets. Fatu opened the match the way only Fatu can, with that terrifying explosion of violence that made him one of the most captivating acts on SmackDown over the past 2 years. He didn't go for holds. He didn't try to ground McIntyre and work a body part. He just attacked. Spear into the corner. Shoulder blocks that rattled the ring frame. A running hip attack that sent Drew crashing into the turnbuckle with a sound that echoed through the entire stadium. But McIntyre, this darker, colder, more dangerous version of Drew McIntyre, absorbed it. He absorbed it with that sinister grin that he has been wearing since the championship was taken from him. Like pain was fuel. Like suffering was just additional motivation. McIntyre fired back with a Glasgow Kiss headbutt that opened a cut above Fatu's eye within the first 3 minutes of the match. And remember, no rules. No one stopping this. No doctor checking the cut. Blood was always going to flow in this match, and it did, early and often. The match spilled to the outside within 5 minutes. And that's where things got truly lawless. McIntyre grabbed a steel chair from under the ring and introduced it to Fatu's back, spine, ribs, and skull with absolutely no hesitation and no mercy. He wasn't using the chair as a prop. He was using it as a weapon in the truest, most violent sense of the word. Fatu stumbled into the barricade and McIntyre hit him so hard with that chair that the entire ringside area went silent for half a second before the crowd erupted. But Fatu, and this is why Jacob Fatu is one of the most legitimately terrifying performers in wrestling today, Fatu did not go down. He turned around. Blood streaming down his face, eyes absolutely wild, and he smiled. He smiled at Drew McIntyre holding that bent, mangled steel chair. And then he charged. The sequence that followed is already being called one of the most intense stretches of in-ring action in WrestleMania history. Fatu got his hands on the chair and repaid every single shot with interest, backing McIntyre up the entrance ramp and sending him crashing through a production table with a running suplex that had the Las Vegas crowd on their feet and losing their absolute minds. Both men lay in the wreckage of that table for what felt like an eternity. Neither man moved. The crowd chanted, "This is awesome." And they were absolutely right. McIntyre got up first. He always gets up first. That's who he is. That veteran instinct and sheer iron will dragging him to his feet when every physical signal in his body is telling him to stay down. He dragged Fatu back toward the ring, rolled him in, and began the methodical dismantling that we have seen from the Scottish psychopath when he is truly in his element. There was a moment about 17 minutes into the match where McIntyre had Fatu in the corner, raining down elbows with both men absolutely covered in blood, that the camera cut to the crowd and you could see people just standing there. Not cheering, not chanting, just stunned. Just watching two men hurt each other in a way that professional wrestling rarely allows itself to go anymore. And then came the finishing sequence, and this is where it gets genuinely controversial, genuinely debatable, and genuinely worth every single minute of your attention. Fatu hit the Samoan spike. His devastating, signature strike that has put away opponents all year long on SmackDown. McIntyre went down. Fatu covered him. The official who was there only to count a pinfall, remember, not to call anything else, slapped the mat once, twice. And McIntyre kicked out at 2 9/10. The stadium erupted. The energy was electric and absolutely unreal. Fatu, visibly shaken that McIntyre had absorbed his finisher, looked around the ring. He slid outside. He went under the ring. And he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. And that decision, Jacob Fatu trying to restrain and finish Drew McIntyre with handcuffs, was the moment the match turned. Because McIntyre, in one of the most remarkable displays of ring awareness and veteran instinct that this writer has ever witnessed, reversed the handcuff attempt and cuffed Fatu's arm to the bottom rope. In one smooth, violent motion, Fatu was stuck, tethered, unable to move freely. And what Drew McIntyre did next is why this moment is going to be talked about for years. He didn't just pin him, he stood over Jacob Fatu. He looked down at the man who took his championship, the man who cost him his Wrestlemania main event, the man who humiliated him in front of the entire WWE universe, and he hit the Claymore kick. Full speed, full force, right to the skull. The crowd exploded. The official counted 3. And Drew McIntyre, the Scottish psychopath, stood in the middle of a blood-soaked ring at WrestleMania 42 with his arms raised, pyro going off around him, 65,000 people in Las Vegas chanting his name. It was one of the most viscerally satisfying, emotionally charged, visually stunning moments in recent WrestleMania memory. Segment 4, The Aftermath and Why This Matters. Now let's talk about what this means. Because the result matters. But what happens next matters even more. Drew McIntyre got his revenge. He got his WrestleMania moment. But think about what his situation actually is right now. He has no championship. He is not in a title picture. He won a brutal, lawless unsanctioned match that by its very nature has no contractual implications, no title shots attached, no Monday morning leverage. So where does the Scottish psychopath go from here? And on the other side, Jacob Fatu. He lost. He lost in one of the most high-profile, most watched matches of his career so far. The opening match of WrestleMania 42, broadcast on ESPN2 to a mainstream audience that may have never seen him before. And he lost. He lost with handcuffs involved in the finish, which means his supporters are going to argue loudly and aggressively that the result was not clean, that Fatu was restrained, that given a fair fight, the Samoan werewolf wins that match 10 times out of 10. Is that a valid argument? Honestly? There is something to it. The finish was creative and it was perfectly in character for the darker, more cunning version of Drew McIntyre that we've been watching develop over the past several months. But it also gives Fatu every reason to come back, every reason to continue this feud, every reason to claim that justice has not been served. And here is the hottest take I am going to give you today. I do not think this feud is over. I think what we just watched was chapter 1 of a 2-chapter story. McIntyre got the WrestleMania win, but Fatu is going to come back angrier, more focused, and more dangerous than ever. And the next time these two meet, whether it's at SummerSlam, whether it's at Clash of Champions, whether it's in some unsanctioned rematch that Fatu demands, it is going to be even more violent and even more personal than what we just watched at Allegiant Stadium. Tell me what you think in the comments. Do you want a rematch? Did Drew deserve this win? Was the handcuff finish a cop-out or was it brilliant storytelling? Because this is the conversation the entire wrestling world is having tonight, and I want Ring Rumble 1's community right at the center of it. Segment 5, The Bigger Picture, Drew's Legacy and Fatu's Future. Let me get a little deeper on Drew McIntyre for a second because I think this moment deserves real recognition. Drew McIntyre has had one of the most fascinating, most turbulent, and most emotionally complicated runs of any WWE superstar in the past decade. He was the guy who was pushed to the moon and then released. He rebuilt himself on the independent scene and in Europe. He came back, he became Universal Champion in the middle of an empty arena during the pandemic, one of the greatest WrestleMania moments ever, by the way, even without a crowd, and then he spent years being the guy who was almost there. The guy who was right there at the top of the card, right on the verge of the main event, but always one moment away from breaking through completely. He won the WWE Championship earlier this year and then lost it. He lost his WrestleMania main event spot. And then he was handed an unsanctioned match against Jacob Fatu to open night 1. And instead of complaining, instead of asking for more, instead of pulling political strings or refusing to work the opener, he went out to that ring and he delivered. He delivered the most talked about match of the opening night of WrestleMania 42. He made people feel something. He reminded the entire wrestling world that Drew McIntyre, when fully motivated, when given the freedom to be dark and dangerous and absolutely unhinged, is one of the 5 best performers on the planet. That matters. That should have consequences. WWE Creative needs to take note of what Drew McIntyre just did at WrestleMania 42 and build something meaningful around it heading into the summer. Now Jacob Fatu. Let's be fair. Let's be honest. Because Jacob Fatu in defeat is still one of the most compelling figures in all of professional wrestling right now. He is 28 years old. He carries the weight of the Fatu family legacy with absolute conviction. He has that magnetic, unpredictable intensity in the ring that you simply cannot teach and cannot manufacture. He has promo ability that has grown enormously over the past year, and he has a storyline that is rich with unresolved threads: the question of who actually attacked him backstage, his complicated relationship with Solo Sikoa and the remnants of the bloodline, and now a fresh, burning loss at WrestleMania that is going to absolutely fuel him going forward. The future of Jacob Fatu on SmackDown is genuinely one of the most exciting creative prospects in WWE right now, and I would argue that this WrestleMania loss, if handled correctly, makes him more interesting, not less. Closing the call to action. Here is what I need you to do right now. First, comment below. Tell me your single hottest take on Drew McIntyre versus Jacob Fatu at WrestleMania 42. Was it the best match of the night? Was the finish clean? Where do both men go from here? The most passionate, most well-argued comment is getting pinned to the top of this video. Second, share this video. Share it in every wrestling group you're in. Share it with the friend who said Drew McIntyre was finished. Share it with the person who told you Jacob Fatu was too green for WrestleMania. This match proved everyone wrong, and I want the entire wrestling world to have this breakdown in their feed tonight.